everybody out there on the internet. Thank you for coming to Book Passage Live. Thank you, thank you, thank you. See some people coming in, some people coming in. It's very nice to have you all. I'm certain some more people will come in from wherever else they do. I'm just going to start my intro. So hello everybody and welcome to Book Passage Live. We here at the bookstore are very excited to bring to you some of the best authors and conversations you can find out there on the internet. If you've seen one of these events before, then, well, welcome back. If you are new here, however, then Book Passage is an independently run bookstore out of the San Francisco Bay Area, and back when crowds weren't quite so dangerous, we used to hold events like these all the time. And as we are now streaming on YouTube, and I think we'll continue to do so, at least in some capacity in the future, please consider subscribing by clicking the subscribe button below. It doesn't cost you anything, and honestly, truthfully does help us out a lot. If you do like our conversation tonight and you want to hear more, you can click the notification bell just next to the subscribe button, and you'll be alerted every time that we go live, or even post a pre-recorded author interview, as we do every once in a while. If you'd like to check out tonight's book, permission granted, or anything else that gets mentioned here tonight, you can find it all at bookpassage.com. There will be a link in the YouTube chat in just a minute, and there is already a link in the description below. Finally, and this one's very important, if you have any questions for tonight's speakers, please take the time to write them in the YouTube chat, just to the right of the screen or just below, depending on what version of the YouTube you're looking in. We will do our best to make sure that any of your questions get put into our internal chat so that we can read them and answer them. Today, I will be the one reading the questions aloud, so you may hear my voice float in from the ether. This is just to accommodate everybody that's reading questions and answering them as well. We, as I said, don't always get to all of the questions, but regardless, all of them are very, very appreciated, particularly your praise for the books. Everybody loves hearing about that. Thank you very much. Now, on to tonight's guests. First off, Regina Louise is the author of the memoirs Somebody's Someone and Someone Has Led This Child to Believe, and is also the author of our book tonight, which is Permission Granted. She's a summa cum laude graduate of California Institute of Integral Studies with a Master of Fine Arts degree, and she lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. In conversation tonight, we have Susan Straight, who has published 8 novels, including Highwire Moon and A Million Nightingales, and the memoir In the Country of Women. She's been a finalist for the National Book Award and has received the Robert Kirsch Award for Lifetime Achievement from the LA Times Book Prizes, the O. Henry Prize, and Guggenheim Fellowship. Everyone, I'm so excited for tonight's conversation. We are incredibly lucky to have such excellent people with us tonight. Now, let me get myself out of the way and hand it over to our guests. Please welcome Susan and Regina. Susan and Regina.
Hi, I'm so excited to talk about this book. I've enjoyed sharing this book, Regina, with my students, of which you used to be one of my students. Yes. And it was super exciting to talk about your journey to publication. And I really love the cover. And I have to say, before we say anything else, this part is super fun for me. We did not call each other and say, hey, let's both wear red. That didn't happen.
No.
So I'm going to tell you why I'm wearing this shirt, because it has to do with your amazing book. So I bought this weird, you see the whole cowl neck thing? You remember those times?
Yes.
The cowl neck from the 80s? I bought this shirt in 1985 at the Colton Auction Swap Meet, which is where I used to have to buy clothes. And I've had this shirt in my closet ever since. My 3 daughters find it hilarious that I still have it. I wore this shirt today to say I love the idea of self-transformation. Like that I grew up like this poor kid who wanted to be a writer, and I'm putting this shirt on to say I remember shopping at the Colton Swap Meet, which was a bunch of tents in a dirt lot, and you had to get there at 5 a.m. to get the good stuff. And the other thing, you see my earrings?
Yes, they're beautiful.
These are so cheesy, and I bought these in New York City on the street where everybody gets their jewelry because my middle kid was going to prom and I was on a book tour. And I said, I'm going to New York City. And my biggest job on that book tour date, Regina, was I bought 7 pairs of earrings so she could choose the right one for prom. So the other thing I know we're going to talk about is that balance between being a writer, a woman, a mother, a daughter, and all of that. So anyway, I'm really excited. I'm excited to see that you wore red too.
Yes.
So
And I wore red because I am actually I have this dress that matches my book, but because I'm so inundated with obligations in terms of the work I do in the real world, I am putting my actual book launch off until June 20th, which is Father's Day, but I don't care. I am my own father. So I'm going to wear that dress on that day. And so today I thought I want to wear something plunging where I can wear this little thing. So you got your cool,
I did the
know,
cowl neck to cover
you
up
got the
everything.
right. And I'm going for, if I drop the camera any lower, we're going to be plunging into my belly button. So we won't do that.
Well, I think it's really funny that we haven't seen each other for a while and that we both wore red. And I haven't worn these earrings for ages, and I got them out because I wanted to tell that, like, shopping for prom earring story, because that's exactly what I love about this book, is that it's really about how we feel about our self-worth as mothers, as writers, as daughters, but mostly as women in this time right now. And so how do you think your book helps somebody sort of get at this idea of how worthy each of us is as an individual?
What a beautiful question. Susan, as a writer, I write to understand better what I know. And your question is provocative in the moment. I'm allowing it to land in the moment and not act as though I have the perfect, answer for that question, but to let it sit for a moment and organically sort of percolate and say that on the heels of the Me Too movement, on the heels of Black Lives Matter, there is a awakening that has been afoot for quite some time. As a woman who is Black identified and a woman who, as a result of my gender and the level of education and experience that I have, all of that to some degree is an obstacle against me. I occupy space in a demographic that is underpaid by 45 to 49%. I write in my book that African American women will, although we have the passion and the drive and the desire to be part of the C-suite, we are less likely, 29% over other women, to be promoted, and we receive 49% less pay of the women who are our colleagues. And as a result of all that, in my lifetime, I will miss out on $1 million of liquid equity. And so this is a book that sort of builds upon the Milton Berle axiom. If the door of opportunity does not open, build a new door. This is about building a new door. This is about me not asking anyone for permission, but stepping up, leveling up, right? Shifting my mindset to understand there's no one to ask permission from except me.
Right. I think that's what I loved so much, is that we always hear, if only you do this other thing, you'll be better off, or you'll feel better about yourself. If you do this other thing, or you buy this other thing, or you change your way of looking at the world. And above me, this is the person who keeps me company while I'm writing, is my mother-in-law, Alberta Sims, and her sister Rosie. And I have this picture above me because Alberta taught me so much about cooking for the stranger and welcoming everybody into our homes and taking care of everybody. At the same time, my mother-in-law was exactly what you just said. Everything she did was 3 times as hard at her job, as she was the only Black woman there. And she took care of everybody, and she never took care of herself. And the other thing I loved about Permission Granted is the idea that we could sit with ourselves in the quiet and say something beautiful and affirming to ourselves. Where did you come up with that idea that we could be still and quiet within ourselves and say something that makes us love ourselves?
Wow. Again, you know how to ask the beautiful question. I remember being in solitary confinement as a young girl in foster care in a room, 10 by 10, no door handles, no windows, only a concrete floor. And all that was there was the light that came across the threshold at the foot of the door. And I remember back then speaking my future into that light. I remember this idea of being suffocated, just completely suffocated with terror, with the horror of the aloneness, the isolation that was forced upon my young being. And it was in those moments that I would turn to my own innocence and say, into the light, it's okay. You're going to be good. Or I'd say, I am okay. I am good. I am going to live and I'm going to live to tell. And as a little girl, I would say, I'm going to tell on y'all one day. But as I look back on that now, I was self soothing. I was holding the weight of my own broken heart. I was holding space for the terror that was acted upon me and the terror that was erupting inside of me. And that's one of the first memories I have of self-soothing and finding refuge right where I was.
I think I remember so vividly the very first few times we talked about your time when you were in that institution. And what I find fascinating is how some of us in our brains, we remember every detail. And I don't know if you remember this, but you and I were sitting on a concrete bench and we were outside the classroom, just the two of us after class. And you were telling me about this place. And you had a chapter in your memoir called Milk Vat back then. And you didn't want to write it. And it was about that you didn't want to drink the milk that they had put all this medication in. And you were resisting. And I think it's so interesting to hear you right now in your voice, remembering being a little girl and resisting in that way. And so your whole ethos as a memoirist, the first 2 books, was about this fierce resistance that you had to put up to keep yourself, as an integral person, as a human, is that you had to resist all of these attacks on your personhood. Do you still remember those things in such vivid detail, even while you're writing now?
Beautiful question. Yes,
Yeah.
but the epigenetic fingerprints, if you will, of my particular terrors, my particular memories, the things that haunted me
Right.
and that sometimes ride shotgun with me. Yes, I'm well aware of them, and I've learned to have agency with them and to some degree to give them that, to give the feelings, the memories, the time and the space to, because it's who I am. Sometimes those memories come in slant, like
Mm-hmm.
like the light at the bottom of that door of solitary confinement. And I have to lean a little bit. I have to lean with it to work with it and give it room to also express and and be fodder for me and be a muse for me so that I can go into praxis with it, a deep, deep sense of interrogation, instigation, observation, excavation, and then take from it, Susan, the meaning of it so that I'm not a victim of it so much as learning from it, making meaning from it in order to be the victor of it. And although the memories will come up, they don't hijack my reality and take over
Right.
and support me in dissociating, but more so, I am in the driver's seat and I take the time that it takes to masticate, to metabolize, and then to offer my own innocence, the empathy and the compassion now that it didn't get then.
I completely agree because this is what we're told often by men too. Especially, I mean, when I was writing In the Country of Women, my three daughters were shocked that I had never told them some of the bad things that happened to me or my friends or their aunts, my cousins. And they said, "Why didn't you ever tell us this when we were growing up?" And I think one of the things that, as I traveled around the country for that memoir, was that women came up afterwards and said, "We don't tell those things to our children, and we don't tell them to our mothers. We tell them to each other. We tell them to women our own age. We tell them to our cousins and our best friends, our coworkers, our like roommates. And once we tell them, the memory hasn't left us. It's just been shared. Then we can deal with it. And that's exactly what I heard you saying is when men say, well, why can't you just forget and let that go, that happened to you? Or why can't you just move forward and pretend it didn't happen to you? I love the fact that you're saying, I remember everything, because I remember everything. I remember every smell, every detail. That doesn't mean it conquers us. It means we still own it. It happened to us. But once we share it, to me, once I share it with someone who is like us, our age, then I have somebody else to help me carry the burden. And that's an old cliche. But again, I go back to my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law and her three sisters endured all kinds of stuff, but they had each other. So this book is really about having yourself for backup and then also making sure that you have your community around you that you can lean on. So who is your community that you lean on? Who's the person that you can tell anything to?
Ooh.
After you tell it to yourself, girl,
Right,
who
right,
do you tell it to?
right, right. It's interesting. I'm a bit of a loner,
I know.
and it surprises me, because with all due respect, to my personality, I have a very, very big, beautiful, deep personality. I think very deeply and yeah, very deeply. And it's not easy for me to find people who can hold the space for all of me and them to show up in.
Mhm.
So I have a spiritual teacher. I call him a spiritual teacher. He is a descendant of people who survived, you know, 1940s Germany, and his capacity to sit with the unconscionable and that for which we don't always have language for is as deep as my capacity. So And then when I want to keep it light and, kind of swim on the surface of it all, I have I would say 3 people that, I try and save them from me. Because when I come in hot. Nothing passes me. I see it all, like in this 3D Technicolor. So if I need to have fun and do the girly thing and go shopping and, do all that, I have my girls that I can unpack
Mhm.
a bit of life with and a bit of honesty and transparency. But really, one of the consequences of going through foster care, I never like I have done well to preserve my sanity, to satisfy my desires to be a creative, which I came to quite late in life. But making friends, I, that's not something that is, I know how to be with people. I'm great with acquaintances. I'm great with, let's come in and exchange brilliant ideas and experiences. But in terms of how to grow relationships past that initial stage, that has not been my strength in this lifetime. So I'm keeping it very real.
I think that's why you're a writer, Regina. That's who we are as writers. That's why we always got along, because we were taking care of everybody. When the years that we knew each other, we were frantically taking care of everyone. But the thing I kept telling you was we have to carve out that time alone to get the writing done.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a trick question, it was an honest question. I have my cousin by marriage, Terry, and she's 5 years older than me. Um, she knew the early Black Panthers in LA. She came up super hard with mom's, we had those times we've talked about. And my 3 daughters are grown now. They're 32 and getting ready to be 30 and 25. And they'll say to me, like, you don't ever talk to us the way you talk to cousin Terry. And they know that when things are bad, like you said, I will go. Terry only lives 3 blocks from here. I will go over there and it's nighttime, Regina, and Terry's air conditioning doesn't always work and it might be 106 and we have to leave the screen door open and we sit in the dark.
Woo!
And we'll sit there for 3 hours. And in the dark for those 3 hours, we just cover all the hurtful things. And when I get back in the car and I put on my Art Laboe Killer Oldies and I come home, I am always calmed down. And that's why I asked you that question, because for me, writing is the other thing that does that for us.
Mm-hmm.
Is for us to be in solitude
Mm-hmm.
is almost like being with cousin Terry or with your mentor, where you're like, I'm going to make sense of this by writing it down. So I do really, really love what you've got in here, which to me, some of the places that I bookmark, there's lots of pages that's folded over in this book. Lots of pages.
Hey!
And I'm going to show you one. And this is the part that says, pause to consider, how often have you given everything you have to another person? A lover, a family member, or a friend? Who have you given chance after chance to show you some form of reciprocity? What will it take for you to be for yourself the kind of person you've been for others? This is definitely a bent page, because that's the thing, is we have our Terry, cousin Terry, or your mentor. We have our writing. But then there's that moment where you talk about being kind to ourselves and saying, it's time for me to sit down and have a cup of tea or a shot of whiskey or watch a bad TV show or just sit on the porch and stare out into the sunset and don't let anybody talk to me for a minute. Why do we find that so hard? Girl, why is that so hard for us?
Ooh, that's one of those philosophical questions.
Why can't we just do it?
Well, aside from the obvious that we are creatures of the pack, right? We find safety and belonging in the pack, and we find safety, belonging, and acceptance in the pact. And in some ways, we need to first experience that in relationship with someone in a healthy way in order to have it for ourselves. So for those people who were fortunate enough to to be parented and handled and cared for and loved in such a way where self-soothing and time alone was a growth edge, a destination that their particular caretakers, strived for, then they're going to understand the value of what it means to be alone with our aloneness. But we're not a culture of that in any way, sense of the word, unless you were fortunate enough to grow up in a brilliant bohemian or hippie commune, and that was the value, right? Alone time and self-soothing,
Right.
it's an idea of the last 15 to 20 years, but I don't reach out so much because I write about some of the injuries that I personally have had in reaching out to other people to support me in my art, reaching out to other people to see me, to hear me. Because if somebody is, let's say somebody is frozen, somebody is having a block, somebody's not having that relationship with fluidity that I am, my coming to them for support or whatnot have you could really trigger their stuff. So, I know I kind of went off of the question that you said in terms of why don't we give that to ourselves as much as we should. And I again say, I believe we're taught to run in the pack. And I believe that I I show up for myself actually more than I give myself credit for. I am like I said, I'm a loner, and I actually play like during this pandemic. Oh my gosh, I have fallen in love with my own innocence, right? With not so much giving and striving and overreaching, over investing in other people, because that to me is a form of manipulation, and it's a form of being inauthentic, and it's a form of running from my own aloneness, which I think culturally we are groomed to do.
Well, it's true that I think as we get older, because we're close to the same age, and as we get older, it's easy to think, well, I'm going to go help this other person. I'm going to be the savior, right? I'm going to go. And even this morning, I spent 3 hours helping my little mom who's got dementia, who was super mean in the past. And now she needs me to do everything for her. And suddenly my kids are like, why are you doing everything for grandma? And then they've seen her now and they're like, oh, nice grandma is so cool. How come we couldn't have nice grandma when we were growing up? And I'm like, that's just not what we got. We have nice grandma now that you guys are gone. And so all of that is biology, girl. I think, Regina, of how much biology shapes us as women. We have kids or we don't. We have parents or we don't. My mom was scarred by having a terrible stepmother and having many of the same experiences you had. And I love the fact that I really, really love, there's another section in the book that I love so much. And it is presence. I first became aware of the power of my own presence by way of a dream. Not just once, but many times throughout my life, I've experienced the purest sense of my existence during dream states. The first of such dreams occurred when I was around 10. I'd watched my sister braid her own hair and wanted desperately for her to teach me, which she refused to do. I watched her fingers flit in and out of her thick mass of hair, crissing and crossing until a braided pattern appeared. I marveled at what seemed to me to be magic. Later that night, I took the visual memory of my sister's hair braiding to bed with me. I reenacted her fingers' movements in bullet time sequence. The writing here is
You're
so
gonna make me
good.
cry.
what can I say? I'm good at my job. I'm good at my job was just to recognize beautiful writing. That's why we love each other. The writing in here is so beautiful, Regina. And what you're saying is that you as a human had to be quiet enough to think about your dream and to let that dream come into your fingers. But the beauty of your writing, your sister's fingers are flitting in and out of her hair. That's what makes this book so good. And that's what makes me so proud to know you, because choosing the perfect word is how we make a book beautiful. And so I just wanted to say to you, all of the things that we're talking about now, they're all distilled down into that beautiful paragraph where you're like, here's this beautiful memory, which is why I sort of started asking, like, who were you as a person and what you remember? But to take that memory and distill it down into this absolutely perfect scene that any reader can see. And then you felt that so deeply that you were able to braid her hair and braid your own hair, and no one believed you could do it. That's almost like, a Helen Keller moment where you're remembering the feeling of someone's fingers on your hand. And so I love that passage. It was one of my favorite passages in the book. And that is about us being quiet enough to sort of say, here's a dream, and here's who I am, and here's who I want to be. And then to think about how to write that down. That's, I think, one of the real strengths of the book. So I really loved that passage. And you add some tenderness for yourself in there, which is what we're talking about.
Right.
You're very tender to yourself there.
Being very tender to the self it's really fascinating. You know, it's life is so life is so packed with dimensions of experiences that invite me, us, time and time again to it's like a it's like this capricious little girl who says, I get eye contact with her if I dare. Oh, sometimes I just can't. But then when I get eye contact, she's like, come on, follow. And then I'm in my own little Alice in Wonderland,
Right.
real life fairy tale to get to those places that invite me to touch, to touch my own humanity, to touch my own fragility, my yeah, my own fragility. And to know that just behind the veil of that is something else, and then a something else. And it's really interesting when we sit here and we talk about this idea of tenderness. I had a super, super powerful meeting with my spiritual teacher today. My book dropped yesterday, and you know, I just kind of wanted to touch base. And one of the things, of the many things we spoke of, but one of the things we talked about is how my first book, and you and I actually talked about this at one point back in graduate school, that my first book was sort of like my 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 latency childhood.
Mm-hmm.
The second book was more of my adolescence.
Mm-hmm.
And this book is really the rite of passage into adulthood. And ironically, in this book, I look back at some of the experiences, and as opposed to being victimized, where I'm going to tell you what happened, I am instead working to find the victory, as I said before, but to also go to those places, those selves, those memory, and met out clemency to them,
Mm-hmm.
to be sacred with all that has happened, the good, the bad, the that which I turn from, but I must turn back to and tend to, and do now what I didn't know to do then. So thus is why the tenderness, the good enough mother is present. in this book?
Well, I enjoyed reading that, and yeah, it was really moving. And the funny thing is that when I think about your first two books, you're as a memoirist, you were sort of excavating these painful stories and you were getting them down, which has to happen. But now you've really changed as a writer, and that was going to be my next question, but you already answered it, because that is a turning point where you don't just recount what happened, but we always talked about going 3 layers deep. Like there's the incident that happens, and then there's the recall of the incident. You automatically change it because everyone's memory is different. But to make it into art is that you take that incident and you look at it through what's the universal lens, and then you go all the way back into what does this mean that I can give to like a larger readership. So this book definitely does that. And I have one more. I know we have a couple questions showing up in the chat, but I have one more question that really came to me while I was reading your book, and it's kind of a bigger question. And I think it's not that it's only for women, but I think it's specific to women right now, Regina, and that is this idea of perfection. Like right now, something that my daughters and I talk about, and my step grandmother died at 96, and we were talking about her today because she was a nurse at Kaiser, the original Kaiser. She was the original head nurse at Kaiser Steel, and she never smiled in her whole life, my step grandmother, because she was one of 10 kids. I write about her a lot in my memoir because she had such a terrible childhood that then she passed that on to my mom when she inherited my mom, who was orphaned at 9. And then my mom couldn't figure out how to do it. My daughters and I talk about this idea of perfection that's given to us, and especially to them, Regina. This notion that, like, if you're an Instagram influencer as a mom, everything you do looks perfect. Like you make your own baby food and your kid always looks amazing and you guys are wearing matching clothes. Girl, we did not have that to worry about. Like we were, you had your son, I had my 3 daughters. We were just trying to keep everybody alive, right? And so now that idea of perfection, I think it's really damaging sometimes to us as women. Like that we have to look this way all the time, or we have to smile and be a certain way at work or at home. And inside is that little girl that you talk about that needs self-soothing, or that damaged person who's been helping everybody else. So how do you deal with that idea of what perfection seems to be demanding of us?
One of the beautiful question. One of the byproducts of not growing up as a sexualized being, meaning as a Black girl who's invisible in a society. I could walk down the street and people just would not catch eyes with me. So I never had the burden of being the kind of beautiful that then got to be objectified and sexualized and worshiped. I was never an object of anyone's desire on any level. So there was
Me neither, girl. Because I was 4'11" and weighed 90 pounds, and I was just invisible. And I grew up in a Black neighborhood. People were like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you eat?
right. So in a way, my Blackness preserved me. It protected me. It inoculated me from the projections of those who, at the very least, could only offer me an experience of me through what they felt, or through the ways in which they felt they could benefit from me and use me and so forth, have you. So for me, I've never had a relationship with trying to be perfect. Now, and that's just as a social agent, that sense of perfectionism never quite existed for me because I am vain enough to think I'm pretty kick-ass. I'm kind of hot.
But you're in the beauty industry too. So that's the other
Right,
reason I'm fascinated with this.
right. Well, so what I was going to say now, if we want to talk about how to execute a perfect haircut, the Vidal Sassoon way, now we can talk because I could wield a pair of shears to cut a perfect line, which is basically a line, the hairline that would hold the weight of the hair above it. And visually, optically, the line is without slant, without flaw, without a hair out of place. So I feel that it's important for us to find the places we can employ the pattern of needing to express ourselves in a certain way
Mhm.
that can be accomplished in real time. So, whether that's learning syntax to execute the perfect sentence, but you've just even identified a way to take craft and use something as fleeting and flitting to illustrate a scene about how how consciousness was tapped into being. Like that's a flawless statement as far as I'm concerned. So to me, this notion of perfectionism is a construct that does not exist, but I think it's a great idea that can serve the artist in the sense that how close can we get to perfect pitch? How close can we get a sentence to deliver the emotional resonance? How fabulous can I be in the morning when I wake up and arch my eyebrows to be in perfect alignment with my nostrils that will present my face in a way that's pleasing to the eye, but to not get caught up in that, to to look at it for what it is, a laughable conceit,
Right.
fun, like it's just a state. It will never be fixed, it will never be absolute because it's too fleeting. But if we employ perfectionism, it's a pattern, and if we can and it's a construct, and if we can employ it on our own behalves to inspire us to strive towards a resonance of completeness, a resonance of good enough, I think I would employ perfection as my bitch.
Then I think we're lucky because your real emotion came out in the discussion of the Vidal Sassoon line, which kind of dates us a little bit. But that's all right. I love it. And my perfectionism has always been the beautiful sentence. You know, I mean, that's what I do. That's why I write. And even though I look around, my neighborhood, my house, all the people I take care of, I can't fix everything. I can love everybody, but the only thing I ever had absolute control over in that chaotic life was my own writing, was our own sentences. So I think that's why we were always kindred spirits, as Anne of Green Gables says, you and me.
Yeah.
Um, I want us to get to the questions, and Nick, I think I might be able to read them, so I can
And
do
I want
that.
to say something before we get to the questions because I realized something.
Okay.
And it's important for me to say we know each other because you were my professor in graduate school. There's something very profound about that for me, FYI. And this is so important for me because you were that person that made time for me. You were that person that, yeah, let me slow this down. You made time for me.
Yeah, we had a good time.
And I finished my thesis, which was my second book, which became the premise for the movie. So I need you to recognize me recognizing that you took something that could have gone south very easily. I'm a sensitive bird. And you you gave me so much opportunity. And you're so woke. You're such an ally. Like any woman that looks like you that can write a book about crawling up in a damn pot and licking out the pot liquor, y'all better shut the F up in girl, please. I'm like, what that little bitty thing know about some pot liquor, girl?
But
So,
that's because I walked down that driveway. That was my favorite thing to write about in my memoir. Is I walked down that driveway and I was 15, wearing a janky halter dress from the Colton auction, same place I bought this shirt. And my mother-in-law she said, "Come on in and let me make you a plate." And then we stood there at the sink. And I mean, I was a child of this poor little immigrant mom who the only thing we were good for was cleaning. We cleaned apartments, we cleaned toilets, we cleaned junkyards, we cleaned bathrooms, we cleaned rental houses. And so there I was 15, and I was talking to my future mother-in-law, and I started cleaning the sink without thinking about it, just cleaning, and she was telling me stories while I was cleaning. And that was my big life-changing moment, Regina, is because my mother-in-law that day, she had this big ham and she was putting foil over all these plates. And she said, "This is for the stranger. You know, you never know who's going to show up hungry." And she was the great storyteller, but also she just unthinkingly took care of everyone. She always made that time. And then I realized once I had my kids and I'm sitting with her, she's telling me stories, and I was a good listener. And so I think you're a good listener. I'm a good listener. The key to being a good writer, I always told you, is the first to be a good listener. And sometimes you got to listen to yourself because we don't listen to ourselves. And so you sat down and listened to yourself about milk vat and about being in solitary and about hair and all of the other things. So it was quite a journey, but I was glad to have taken it with you. That's for sure.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so
I really appreciate that. I do.
yeah, so we better get to these questions
All
though.
right, let's go.
Nick, I can read them. I figured it out now. So Nick, the first question that I'll read. Your previous two books, Regina, were memoirs, as far as I can tell. Can you speak a little on what drove you to write this self-help or psychological book, Regina?
I make my living as a Hoffman process teacher. Hoffman process is a 7-day residential immersive experience that allows individuals who partake in it to take a spiritual journey. And I, somebody who's naturally therapeutic, I mean, the longest relationships I've ever had in my life have been with therapists. And 30, 40 years, that's all I know. Like, I should be an honorary therapist, which in some ways I am, but what I've done is segue that, those life skills. And I am a professional codependent, right? Totally codependent. You can't go through the childhood I had and not be a pro at codependency. But the difference now is I now employ my codependency in the best interest of supporting other people within their journey to healthy psychology. So I don't I don't go into the manipulation and the patterns and the survival skills of codependency that I once did. Now I recognize, oh yeah, I can see that that's what I did to stay safe. Oh yes, and I work through all of that. And as such, I've been able to write a personal growth, mindset changing book to support women, men, people to level up in a way that allows them and invites them to live a more integrous life.
It's a great sort of part of the journey. And the funny thing is the second question was going to be my last question. So I really appreciate whoever sent this in. I was going to ask as an artist what inspires you, but Regina, this person sent in a great question. Could you tell me about your personal writing process, morning, night, music, no music, etc.? I love that question. So tell us what you do.
I write best under stress. I write best. I could, like, if the chaos is going off all around me, I normally write my books on a very small, I go to the notes section of my iPhone and I begin writing. Because why? Because it's contained and it's controlled, and I can only do so much. And
Nice.
so I do as much as I can. And I remember Susan, when I was in school with her, she would say, she would have actually these little tiny books. They are these, which I happen to have lots of, the Moleskin super tiny books,
And this
right?
is what I'm writing on
Yeah,
now. I'm writing on ridiculous post-it note
right,
things.
right. And she would be parked out in the orange orchards, because at UCR, that's what the school, part of the school's identity is, citrus and orange orchards. So I was very inspired by that. And I thought, from here on out, and I learned that in graduate school. So from here on out, I when I need to write longhand, I need to connect in a particular way, I will
Mhm,
use these little notebooks. But
mhm,
mostly I like the movement and the immediate visualization of the letters in my notes. I I don't do writers workshops so much anymore. I'm a little bit allergic to all that. And I don't really write to music. I don't get all cliched about it. I
mhm.
write to muse. I write to deadline. Like this book in particular, I had no idea what I was doing. I did not know how to write this book until and there's no way to know until you, I mean, it was getting crucial, like serious, like OMG, like what? What? And at one point when I turned in the book, my editor was like, no, like, no, this is never going to work. And then I'm panicking because now I may lose the opportunity to do what I've
Right.
dreamt of doing. And how I pull this off, that's a whole nother conversation at another time.
We can have that one another time, but I have to thank both viewers for those questions because they were excellent. And that's the thing is, I really love what you're saying. I even now, during pandemic, two of my grown kids and my son-in-law were home for almost a year, and then my father was ill, my stepfather. My mom has Alzheimer's. I found myself writing on those little things I showed you because just what you said, Regina, it's beautiful. It's handleable. I'm not sitting in front of a screen because I don't get to sit in front of the screen. Everyone's needing stuff, but I can always carry those little notebooks in my purse. I have them in my car. I will pull over, girl, not in the citrus groves necessarily, but anywhere, and write down that idea when it comes to me. So I love that you said that. This was so much fun. It really
Yes,
was. And I
yes, it
love the
was.
book. I'm so proud to have been given this early copy. And I will say there's one last little thing. I have all these things bookmarked, and it is the perfect book to carry around with you and have these little bent pages and say, let me remember how to give myself some love. Let me remember how to sort of think about being kind to myself. So I've had it by my bed and I've really enjoyed it. So it was so nice to be able to spend this time with you. So
Professor Straight,
Regina
thank
Louise,
you. Thank you so much.
it
And
was a lot of fun. And I love Book Passage. First time
yes,
I ever went to Book Passage for one of my novels, it was such a thrill to be, and I got stationery, which I still used forever, that beautiful Book Passage stationery. I wrote so many thank you notes on that. Book Passage is so classy that my kids would be like, can we go to that bookstore where they let us get children's books and then they give mom that totally classy stationery? So shout out to Book Passage, Corte Madera, and other locations.
look,
Regina, you've got it.
I have to tell you, from my last book, someone has led this child to believe. I wrote my second book, and when I called up my publicist, I'm like, I don't care what bookstore, you get me into, but you must get me into the one where they give away. And I still have the note where the one where they give that beautiful gift. I still have the card.
I do too.
That's what's happening. Thank you. Do y'all send them out now? Since we
haven't done them because we haven't had events in quite a while. But when the events do start back up, I'm certain we will.
That's awesome.
Book Passage staple.
Well, thank you, Nick.
Well, and shout out to Book Passage and thanks. This was so much fun.
Much love. Thank you, Susan. Much love.
That was fun. Thank you.
Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for everybody that stuck around. We caught a couple more viewers there at the end, so thank you for being here. And for everybody that had any comments, anything that you shared that wasn't a question will be shared with our speakers after the event. One last time, the book is Permission Granted. You can find it at bookpassage.com and at the link in the description below. We'll ship it right to your house if you don't happen to live in the Bay Area. Or if you live near another independent bookstore that is not Book Passage, you can buy from them as well. That's acceptable. We like them. We like all the independent bookstores. Oh, thank you to Regina for making the time to come out with us tonight, and another thank you to Susan for being such an excellent moderator. We hope to have the both of you back soon. But regardless, thank you again, everybody, for making it out tonight. Thank you one last time to our speakers. I hope to see you again in the next one.
Thank you. Bye, Professor Straight.